Known as the Cherokee Kid, Will Rogers was a trick roper in vaudeville, a newspaper man, radio personality, and actor. He was of Cherokee heritage from both his father and his mother. Raised in Indian Territory, he was very proud of his Native American heritage and used to say to his audiences, "My ancestors didn't come over on the Mayflower, but they met the boat." He was raised on a ranch, riding horses and roping cattle. And after he finished with school, he wound up performing on stage doing rope tricks and telling jokes. He had a gentle, brotherly way of making people feel comfortable. His humor was very popular, and in 1922, he began to write short pieces for newspapers across the United States. His articles were distributed around the nation to more than 500 newspapers. In the 1920s and 30s, before television was invented, he became a popular radio personality, and his witty ideas molded popular opinions. He would joke about politics and American culture, and he would poke fun of other famous people. During the Great Depression, he gained even more fame working as an actor in Hollywood. He starred in 21 highly rated films in only 5 years, and he became Hollywood's highest paid actor. Through it all, he never hid his Native American lineage and was quick to point out his Cherokee identity. He was not afraid of technology, and in the earlier days of aviation, he learned to fly. In 1935, he was flying with his friend Wiley Post over Alaska, and when their plane crashed, both of them were killed. Will was 56 years old. The entire nation mourned the death of Oklahoma Cherokee native Will Rogers.
Hi guys, just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about Jenny Ross Cobb and her contributions to Native American and Oklahoma history. Jenny Ross Cobb was born in December of 1881 in Tahlequah, what was then considered Indian Territory, as Oklahoma had not yet been granted statehood. She was of Cherokee nationality and descent, and was the great-granddaughter of the famous chief John Ross. Jenny Ross Cobb lived near Park Hill at the Murrell home, which is often referred to as Hunter's Home. Hunter's Home is one of the only surviving buildings in Oklahoma which withstood the conflicts in Indian Territory during the Civil War, and Jenny Ross Cobb was directly involved with the preservation effort which has since turned the home into a full-fledged museum. Jenny Ross Cobb was an amateur photographer and took several pictures of Hunter's Home and the surrounding areas of Park Hill and Tahlequah that date back to the turn of the century between around 1895 and 1905. These pictures are some of the oldest surviving pictures of these areas of Indian Territory and were used in the reconstruction and restoration efforts that were necessary to convert the historic Murrell home into a museum. Most of her pictures were of Hunter's Home, but she also took pictures of such notable locations as the Cherokee Female Seminary, which Ross herself attended and graduated from. Ross is often considered to be one of the first Native American photographers, and much of her work is still preserved by the Oklahoma Historical Society. In addition, her contributions to Hunter's Home have added a layer of authenticity that otherwise might have been lost to the ages. Without her expertise, experience, and her photographs, it is entirely possible that Hunter's Home would not be standing today, nor would it be recognized as a historic landmark within the state of Oklahoma.
Another important Native American historical figure was one known for his contributions and the struggles that he faced with his indigenous people during the Civil War. Many times Native Americans are not considered as a part of Civil War history, which was one of the most important episodes in American history. But Apotheahola had an important part in standing up for his people and fighting for their well-being. Apotheahola was born sometime around 1780 in Montgomery County, Alabama. He became a noted speaker in the 1820s as a member of the Upper Creek Council. Apotheahola would eventually come to lead the resistance to removal of his people from their homelands to Indian Territory, commonly known as the Trail of Tears. By 1832, the lower Creeks had voluntarily moved west, leaving Apotheahola as the chief of the Creek tribe, during the government forced removal of the remaining Creeks. When the American Civil War began in 1861, the Creek Council voted to align with the Confederacy. Opothayahola would not join them and decided to try to escape to Kansas with his followers, including people who were formerly enslaved, a number of Native Americans from diverse neighboring tribes, in an attempt to reach safety with the Union forces. During this exodus, the Confederate forces caught up with them. They were chasing after them, and they caught up with them at the battles of Round Mountain and Chustau-Talosh. Despite attempts to capture or otherwise destroy them, the group managed to escape and continued on with their journey. Finally, in December of 1861, the Confederates would scatter the party after surprising them at the Battle of Chustau-Talosh. This caused Opothayahola and his followers to flee without clothing or supplies on what would come to be known as the Trail of Blood and Ice. They had to survive brutal winter weather without supplies. Eventually, the survivors reached their destination and formed the 1st Regiment of Indian Home Guard with the purpose of liberating Indian Territory from Confederate forces. Unfortunately, Opothayahola died from sickness in 1863 while living as a refugee in Kansas during the war. His bravery is something that not many Americans know or remember, or the struggles that he went through, but I'm glad that you can learn about his story.
Born in 1945 in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, Wilma Mankiller was the first woman elected to principal chief of the Cherokee people. Born the 6th of 11 children, Wilma was Cherokee but also of Dutch and Irish descent. She grew up near Rocky Mountain, Oklahoma, and later in San Francisco, California. Her family faced much discrimination in California, and she eventually came back to Oklahoma to attend college at Flaming Rainbow University. The mother of two began working as a tribal planner and program developer for the Cherokee Nation in the 1970s. Mankiller ran for deputy chief of the Cherokee Nation in 1983 and served 2 years before being named principal chief in 1985. She served 2 terms in this position. Mankiller lived by the Cherokee vision of being of good mind, which to her meant making the best out of anything that comes your way, whether it be good or bad, and doing your best to serve others. She wrote 2 books, one an autobiography and the other a book of essays by Indigenous women. She received many awards and recognition for her work. Even though she passed away in 2010, she remains an inspirational figure not just to the Cherokee people, but to the women across the country.
Hello, so this is Eliza Burton Conley, also known as Lida. She was the first woman lawyer in Kansas. She was the first Native American woman to argue a case before the Supreme Court, and she is a citizen of the Wyandot Nation of Kansas. She is famously known for defending her tribe's cemetery when it was up for sale.
Deb Haaland serves as a member of the United States House of Representatives from the great state of New Mexico. She was born on December 2nd, 1960, and she's a member of the Luquana Pueblo tribe and has served in the United States Navy. And in 2006, she received her law degree from the University of New Mexico. She then served as the administrator of the San Felipe Pueblo from 2013 to 2015. After her loss for the lieutenant governorship of New Mexico, she decided that she was going to run for the House of Representatives. And in 2018, she won and was sworn in 2019 as one of the first Native American people ever elected to Congress. She is the co-chair of the Congressional Native American Caucus, and she's a member of the Progressive Caucus. She says, I am not under the belief that I can represent any tribe or even my own tribe, but what I can do is make a seat at the table available to tribal leaders to speak from their own voice. We have a government-to-government relationship with tribes, and they should have that opportunity to weigh in on important decisions that affect them. On March 7, 2019, Holland became the first Native American to preside over the United States House of Representatives. So cool! And this is her in a modern picture of her in Native American wear.
Hi, I'd like to tell you about Dr. Lenata Warjack. Dr. Warjack is a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes and became an activist for Native American rights in the 1960s. In 1968, she was the first Native American student to attend UC Berkeley. In 1969, Dr. Warjack, then just a college student herself, helped unite other college students to take over Alcatraz Island in a peaceful protest against the federal government's treatment of Native Americans. What does that mean? Well, Alcatraz Island, which is located off the coast of California, was owned by the government, and a group of Native Americans wanted the government to pay attention to their rights and honor past treaties it had made with tribes. The protesters moved to the island and refused to leave until the government would listen to their demands. Dr. Warjack was one of the main organizers and lived on the island with her 2-year-old son as part of the protest. She actually traveled back to the mainland on Sundays to deliver her homework to her professors. The occupation of Alcatraz Island lasted 19 months and is considered a turning point of federal policy from that of tribal termination to self-determination. Shortly after the occupation, President Richard Nixon passed the 1975 Indian Self-Determination Act. Dr. Warjack continues her fight for Native American rights. Her book, Native Resistance: An Intergenerational Fight for Survival and Life, chronicles her work and the Native American self-determination movement. She is also a law professor at Boise State University. This is Dr. Lenata Warjack.